Have you ever looked at those gigantic, overflowing baskets of petunias and thought, how do they do that? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and show you exactly how you can create that same amazing look right from scratch. Let's dive in. Believe it or not, it all begins with something this small. I mean, look at that, a single petunia seed. It's practically a speck of dust. But inside this tiny, tiny thing is the entire blueprint for an absolute explosion of summer color. It's kind of amazing, right? And this is the end game. This is the goal. We're going to take that little speck of dust and turn it into these unbelievable, cascading planters that'll make your neighbors stop and stare. It is so rewarding, and I promise you, with a few key tricks, you can totally do this.
So, where do we start? You might think it's with soil or pots, but nope. The very first thing you need to grab is your calendar. Getting the timing right is absolutely everything, especially if you live somewhere with a shorter growing season, like here in Ottawa.
Check this out, 10 to 12 weeks. That's a long time. We're talking almost 3 months. Petunias are really slowpokes at the beginning, so if you want those big, beautiful plants that are ready to burst into bloom by the time summer hits, giving them this massive indoor head start is completely non-negotiable. So here's our whole game plan laid out. We're going to get those seeds sown indoors right at the beginning of March. Then in April, our little seedlings will get an upgrade to their own pots. Come mid-May, we start getting them used to the great outdoors. And then, the big moment, right around the Victoria Day long weekend, it's go time. We plant them outside for the whole summer.
All right, time to get our hands dirty. This is where the magic really starts. We're going to create the perfect little nursery environment to convince these tiny seeds that it's time to wake up and start growing. You know, the process itself is actually pretty simple. First, you'll want to fill your seed trays with a pre-moistened germination soil. That's just a fancy way of saying a nice, light, fluffy mix for new roots. Then just sprinkle the seeds right on top of the soil. Next, pop a clear plastic dome over it to make a little mini greenhouse. And finally, just find a cozy, warm spot for them. That's it.
Okay, pay attention, because this is the most important part. Do not, under any circumstances, cover the seeds with soil. This is the #1 mistake people make. Petunia seeds are special. They actually need light to germinate. If you bury them even a little bit, they just won't sprout. So keep that soil moist, kind of like a wrung-out sponge, but please don't bury those seeds. In about a week, maybe 2, you'll see the tiniest little green specks. Success. The second you see them, it's time to take that plastic dome off. Their needs have totally changed. Now they crave light, lots of it. So you'll want to get a fluorescent light source just a few centimeters above them and leave it on for 14, even 16 hours a day. It's also a good idea to let the temperature drop just a little bit now. So your seeds have officially sprouted. Congratulations, you've got baby petunias. Now our job switches to being good plant parents. We have to give these little guys everything they need to grow up big, strong, and healthy.
And that brings us to a super common question every new gardener asks. When on earth do I start feeding these things? When do they actually need their first meal? Well, the cool thing is the plants will tell you exactly when. See, the very first leaves that pop up, those aren't really leaves. They're part of the seed. You have to wait for the second set of leaves to show up. We call these true leaves, and they look like tiny versions of a grown-up petunia leaf. When you see those, that's your signal. It's time to start fertilizing once a week. And seriously, don't skip this step. Petunias are really hungry plants.
Now, while we're talking about food, we need to touch on something called pH. I know, it sounds a little bit like high school chemistry, but stick with me, it's actually really simple. Just think of it like this. All the food your petunia needs, especially iron, is stored in a locked pantry. The soil's pH is the key. If the key isn't the right shape, if the pH is wrong, that pantry door stays locked and your plant can't eat, even if the food is right there.
And you can see it perfectly right here on this chart. Petunias love slightly acidic soil. That's their happy zone, right between 5.4 and 5.8. In that range, the key fits the lock. The iron pantry is wide open, and your plant is thriving. But if that pH starts to creep up past 6.6, that pantry door slams shut. The iron gets locked away, and your plant starts to have problems.
Okay, let's fast forward a couple of months. Your plants are looking fantastic, the weather is finally starting to warm up, and it is almost time for the big move. We've got to get them ready to leave the nest and start their new life in the great outdoors.
Now there's a really critical step here called hardening off.
You can't just take a plant that's lived its entire life in your perfectly controlled, cozy house and just chuck it outside. It'll go into total shock. So instead, we send it to what I like to call plant bootcamp. We slowly, gradually introduce it to real sun, real wind, and changing temperatures to toughen it up for the real world.
Your bootcamp plan is super straightforward. For about a week, maybe 10 days, you just take your plants outside for a few hours on warm days, and then you bring them back in every night. Once you've done that for a while and you're positive there's no more frost coming, which for us in Ottawa is safely after that Victoria Day weekend, then you can finally plant them in their permanent summer home.
Now, look, gardening isn't always perfect. Things can go a little bit sideways sometimes, but don't you worry. Here are some really quick fixes for the 2 most common little hiccups you might run into.
All right, first one, you go to check on your plants and you notice that the newest, youngest leaves right at the top are looking kind of yellow, especially between the veins. What is going on?
Hey, remember that locked pantry we talked about? This is exactly what that looks like. That yellowing is the classic sign that your plant can't get iron because the pH is too high. The fix is so easy though. Just use a fertilizer made for acid-loving plants. It'll lower the pH and unlock that iron for them.
Okay, problem number 2. What if your little seedlings are looking less like sturdy little plants and more like tall, skinny, kind of floppy teenagers reaching for the sky? What does that mean?
Oh, that is a cry for help. They are desperately stretching, searching for more light. The solution is simple. Just lower your light source so it's much closer to the tops of the plants. Another little pro tip is to make sure their nights are a little bit cooler than their days. That also helps keep them short, stocky, and strong.
So there you have it, the entire journey from a single speck of dust to an absolute spectacle of flowers. Yeah, it takes a little patience and some care along the way, but the reward? A whole summer filled with incredible color that you grew all by yourself is so worth it. So the only question left is, are you ready to give it a try?